The Zelda series contains a lot of different enemies. We have taken a look at a lot of them in pretty much every game, and now it's time to take a look at the enemies we think are the absolute coolest in the series.
It was easy to define which enemies were cool or not in the different games, because there were usually only one incarnation of that enemy in that particular game. But since the Zelda series makes reoccurring enemy types often look different from game to game, we had to make some clear rules.
When we make a list of the coolest enemies, we mostly think of their appearance. Their abilities and fighting styles count as well, but since they are different from each other in the different games, some really cool enemies in one game can look very weird and disappointing in another.
But still, if one incarnation of an enemy is really cool in one game, and perhaps bad in the rest, we still might want to count it. The enemy doesn't have to look cool in every game it appears in, just as long as we find it awesome at least one time.
We will do our best to make our choices clear and reasonable to you. We're the owners of Triforce, I'm owner 2.
And I'm Owner 1, and let us take a look at the 10 enemies we think are the coolest in the Zelda series.
The only enemy to be included from the DS games are those that are the hardest to beat, which would be the Phantoms.
The Phantoms are these invincible enemies, well, to a certain extent anyway, you find in the Temple of the Ocean King in Phantom Hourglass, and the Tower of Spirits in Spirit Tracks.
What's really cool about these, in general, is their look. They're all huge and wear badass armor. And not to mention, there are several different types of these.
They all come in different colors, armors, and with different abilities, where one type can roll like a boulder, another can teleport, but the coolest one is definitely the Torch Phantom. The red color and the fire sword he carries makes this one the coolest looking, but the Phantoms in general were really cool, no matter how annoying it could be to sneak around them. On number 9 we have an enemy making its first appearance in the Dark World in A Link to the Past. We are talking about the buffed up, bomb-throwing Cyclops known as Inox.
Inox makes an appearance in several games, as both regular enemies and a mini-boss. It's got a cool appearance for the most part, but the ones in Phantom Hourglass looks really dumb, to be honest.
Still, the rest of their appearances are more than enough to make them appear on our coolest enemies lists. We like how they look, as they're all giant monsters that take a lot of hits to kill.
They can also deal out a lot of damage, either by blowing you up with bombs or rampaging towards you, like in Four Swords Adventures. We think this is a really cool type of enemy, and it's awesome to see it reappearing in a new game. Well, except for Phantom Hourglass. Paving its way to our 8th place is the ghost type enemy that you find in several games in the series, which would be the Poe.
Appearing in 9 of the different games in the main series is this creepy, lantern-holding Poe. They generally look really cool, except for the ones in Phantom Hourglass. What did this game do to the cool enemies? But they also look very different from each other.
Twilight Princess probably had the creepiest ones with the 4 you find in Arbiter's Grounds. We find the Poes in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask to be the coolest, both the regular ones you find in different areas and the Poe sisters.
We just really liked the mystique around them, how they turn invisible, can go through walls, and they're so cool and creepy with their lanterns and torches. Not to mention their laughs in the N64 games.
The Moblin enemy is one example of how they can look really weird or nothing special in general, but have at least one awesome appearance. The Wind Waker one is funny, but also weird. The ones you find in the original Zelda game aren't much special. The ones in A Link to the Past aren't much either. And oh my god, how ugly they are in Skyward Sword.
The one reason they appear on this list is their badass look in Ocarina of Time. They are freaking huge, massive and intimidating. The Moblins have had their appearance switch between looking like pigs and bulldogs. And we gotta say, we're really happy about the bulldog look in this game.
They're strong, muscular, carry spears, and one even using a club that'll make waves on the ground, knocking you back.
I still remember the first time I went into this maze the first time I was adult Link. I thought this place was filled with Deku Scrubs like with young Link. So I just rushed in, only to have the crap scared out of me when a Moblin yells and charges at me with his spear. Did we mention intimidating?
Yup, but we can't express that enough. You'd think that Link, the big hero in every Zelda game, the boy who has saved Hyrule on several occasions, would never have to face Hyrule's own soldiers.
But what do you know? That actually has happened. The soldiers of Hyrule have appeared as enemies in A Link to the Past, Four Swords Adventures, and A Link Between Worlds. And it started in A Link to the Past with Agony manipulating every soldier and make them attack Link on sight.
What's really cool about these is how their armors and different colors look. Many of these carry different weapons, like swords, spears and bow and arrows. And some of them have different helmets, where the ones with the horns is really cool looking. They're not really hard enemies to fight, but it's really cool how their colors tell us what kind of rank they are. Like how it was in the two first Zelda games with different enemies there.
The green ones are really weak and the red ones are the strongest. They're everywhere, they look cool, and we like how they look really similar to each other in the different games they appear in. They did a good job keeping them look as similar as possible to the original ones, which we find to be the coolest among them. At number 5 we find the green reptilian enemy we all know as Lizalfos. They come in a lot of different variants, and we are sort of including the Dinalfos here as well, since they're really similar to each other.
The Lizalfos first appeared in Adventure of Link, and were a bit annoying to face off with. They did look a bit cool, but there's no doubt that the coolest versions of these are found in the 3D games.
There are a lot of different versions of these, but they all look really cool. The Lizalfos in Ocarina of Time carry a blade and are somewhat tricky to fight with their jumping.
The Dinalfos are pretty similar, but they breathe fire and are generally stronger and sometimes more armored.
Like in Twilight Princess, where some of them even have shields. The Lizalfos found in Twilight Princess are also really cool, where one version has big axe blades on its tail, and another wearing a skull on its head.
And then we got the really cool looking ones in Skyward Sword as well, where they're really fun to fight because of how they use their awesome armor made of stone on their arm to block attacks. And of course that spiky ball on their tails. Even cooler is the Dark Lizalfos.
They do come in a lot of different versions with different weapons, and while the Lizalfos and Dinalfos actually are different from each other, we sort of count them both here, even though we actually find the Lizalfos cooler.
We've already talked about how much we like undead enemies in earlier videos and all that, and for our fourth spot, we put two enemies together.
When you hear that frightening scream, you can't help but freeze in fear while they slowly move towards you and attack in a gruesome way.
We're of course talking about the Redeads, but also the Gibdos. The Gibdos were the first to make an appearance, all the way back in the first game. While they looked more like weird fellas in pajamas there, they've evolved and become cooler looking and more threatening in A Link to the Past.
They appear in many different 2D games and have their own role there, but every time they have appeared in the third dimension, they've shared a lot of the same traits as the Redeads. While the Gibdos are mummies, Redeads are zombies, and they both stand around looking a bit derpy, but we still love how they creep us out.
The Redeads in Wind Waker aren't exactly less frightening either. Their scream is terrifying as all hell, and seeing their eyes glow up isn't comforting in any way either.
The Redead Knights in Twilight Princess sort of became a mix between the two, as they have bandages around their bodies, but not covering it entirely. They're not as scary as the previous ones, but they look incredibly awesome with the giant sword they drag around. The scariest thing about them though, is how they just raise up from the ground.
The Gibdos are pretty cool in general in the 2D games, but we placed them here because of the traits it shares with the Redeads in the 3D games. We think they're frightening, but also really cool, and that's why they both made it to our number 4 spot.
We've always been fans of mysterious people, enemies and bosses, and when you combine a certain mystique with the magic of a wizard, you get the really cool enemies that are called Wizrobes.
The Wizrobes first appeared in the original Legend of Zelda, and they were pretty cool looking there, even though the blue ones were a real pain to fight. Their appearance haven't always been perfect since then.
In Wind Waker, they took the form of a big bird, which we're not a fan of at all. The Phantom Hourglass ones are sort of cooler with their sights, but the bird look is still a bit derpy. And the Majora's Mask version, like... what?
The Wizrobes we love are the likes of what we find in A Link to the Past. They wear robes and a wizard's hat, and we don't know how they look underneath. We don't even know if they're human.
And of course they have magic power, as they can turn invisible and teleport, and they use magic to cast a beam of some sort. They come in different colors based on difficulty, and different abilities, including different elements.
They're really cool in all the 2D games, but it's unfortunate that they haven't made a great appearance in the 3D games. Sure, the abilities of the Wizrobe in Wind Waker are good, but we don't like how they made it look like a bird instead of more of a human wizard, like the rest.
We're also including a couple of the most frustrating enemies you ever have to face in a Zelda game. One of these enemies were a real pain in the first game, and the other enemy, a real pain in the Adventure of Link.
We're of course talking about the Darknet and the Iron Knuckle. Darknets were a real pain because they usually came with a big number in several different dungeons, and you can never hurt them by attacking head on, meaning you have to attack from the side or behind. They always turn towards you whenever you're not prepared for it, and it's easy to die against these.
The Iron Knuckle in Adventure of Link were a real pain because just one of them takes a lot of hits, and they defend themselves very well. Even worse are the blue ones who can take more hits and even throw projectiles.
We liked these because they were challenging, even at a frustrating level. But look at how cool they look! The Darknets have awesome armor, wear a cape and are pretty intimidating, even though they seem disoriented.
The Iron Knuckles in Zelda 2 are no worse either. They wear almost exactly the same things, and generally look really cool. Not to mention that they're really threatening, and you really have to stand your ground to fight these off. So, why are we including both of these?
We already mentioned the similarities between them in these two games just now, but even in the 3D games they play similar roles. In Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, the Iron Knuckle became this huge and intimidating sort of mini-boss enemy that deal out a lot of damage and are exciting to fight.
In Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, the Darknet took over as this role of being a big, heavy-armored and skilled weapon user. They sort of fill out each other's roles whenever one of them is being left out of a game.
They brought a lot of intense battles in the different games, even in the later 2D games as well, such as Minish Cap. They both look awesome, they're exciting to fight, and they're just intimidating and generally one of the most challenging enemies to face off with in the series. Our number one coolest enemy is a type of enemy that has appeared in every Zelda game, and the ones who have been watching our videos for a while should not be surprised that we picked this enemy as our number one coolest. It's of course the Stalfos.
What can we say? We love undead enemies, you know that. And the Stalfos always look awesome. Well, with the exception of Wind Waker, because they look kind of stupid.
No they don't.
Yes they do! Anyway, skeletons are a very typical type of enemy. They're usually a bit scary, and are things that generally shouldn't be alive.
The Stalfos have looked a bit different from game to game, even though they're all skeletons. They've been carrying maces, swords, shields and such, and they're often exciting to fight, especially in the 3D games.
Some Stalfos even use their own bones as weapons, which is also really cool. Even though several of the 2D incarnations are really cool, the 3D ones are definitely the coolest. The Stalfos in Ocarina of Time have some badass armor, with sword and shield. While the ones in Twilight Princess have armor made of wood, they're still pretty badass. They even have to be blown up with a bomb after collapsing, because they will actually put the pieces back together and rise up again. This ability even goes as far back as to A Link to the Past.
Skyward Sword Stalfos wield 2 swords, and there's even a mini-boss wielding 4 swords. They've often made appearances as powerful mini-bosses, which is much appreciated, but they've also made some really badass enemies.
The Stalfos is the most reoccurring enemy. They're usually really cool looking, have cool abilities, and often bring us a good fight. And that is why it is our number one coolest enemy in the series. Hope you enjoyed watching this video, and if you like our choices or anything else in this video, don't forget to give it a like. We'd love to hear your own opinions on this topic, so please, leave it in the comments.
Our next video will be our top 10 character themes, so if you don't want to miss that, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you then.